One heartbeat. That's all it took for Michael C. Schramm to realize the woman he swore no one would ever marry was already untouchable. A tattooed hand slid around her waist, pulling her back against a chest carved from nightmares. Timothy J. Hughes didn't speak. He didn't have to. The city already knew whose wife she was. The rain had been falling for 4 straight days, thick and merciless, turning every sidewalk into black glass and every streetlight into a bleeding halo. Catherine P. Thomas pushed through the clinic doors at 2:17 a.m. White coat swapped for a soaked hoodie, nurse clogs squelching with every exhausted step. 12 hours of stitches, screaming addicts, and a kid with a gunshot wound who wouldn't stop asking for his mom. Her hands still smelled of antiseptic and copper. She was invisible again. Just the way she liked it. Invisible meant safe. Invisible meant no one could hurt her the way Michael Schramm once did. No one will marry you, Kat. Not with your baggage. Not ever. She still heard his voice every time the thunder cracked. Head down, umbrella long surrendered to the wind, she cut across Mott Street toward the subway, Chinatown's neon bleeding red and gold across the puddles. The city didn't care that she was bone-tired, that her left shoe had a hole, that her heart still flinched at raised voices. The city just kept raining. A black Maybach slid out of the darkness and stopped beside her, tires hissing like a warning. The rear door opened before she could run. Timothy J. Hughes stepped into the storm like it had been waiting for permission. Black wool coat, collar up, rain beating and rolling off the fabric as if even water was afraid to cling too long. The streetlights carved sharp shadows across cheekbones that belonged on wanted posters and cathedral statues in the same breath. Ink crawled up his neck and disappeared beneath the coat. Old ink, prison ink, syndicate ink. He didn't open an umbrella. He didn't need to. The rain simply behaved around him. He walked straight to her, slow, deliberate, the way a wolf crosses an empty road when it already knows the deer isn't going anywhere. His eyes storm gray, unreadable, locked on hers and softened by exactly 1 degree. Catherine. 1 word. Her name in his mouth sounded like a verdict and a prayer. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because she knew who he was. Everyone south of 14th Street did. Timothy Hughes didn't visit people. People were brought to him. And then a voice sliced through the rain like a blade. Catherine? She turned. Michael stood 10 yards away, drenched, eyes wild, the same cruel twist to his mouth she'd once mistaken for passion. He looked at her. Then at Timothy. Then at the possessive hand now resting on her hip. What the fuck? Michael started forward, fists clenched. Timothy moved 1 step, and the air itself seemed to thicken. Michael froze mid-stride, finally understanding the difference between a man who yelled and a man who never had to. Timothy's arm slid fully around her waist, pulling her back against the solid wall of his chest. His coat enveloped her, warm, expensive, smelling of gun oil and cedar. The city disappeared. There was only the steady drum of his heartbeat against her spine and the low, lethal murmur at her ear meant for Michael alone. Walk away. 2 words. Quiet. Final. Michael's face cycled through shock, recognition, and something that looked a lot like terror. His gaze dropped to the platinum band on Catherine's left hand, simple, understated, impossible to miss. His mouth opened. Closed. The rain filled the silence. Timothy's fingers tightened, tattooed knuckles brushing the hollow of her throat in a gesture that was pure possession and pure protection all at once. Michael took 1 stumbling step backward, then another, until the dark swallowed him. Catherine was shaking cold, adrenaline, a lifetime of being told she was worthless crashing against the impossible truth pressing against her back. Timothy turned her gently, shielding her from the storm and from the ghost now running through it. His thumb brushed a raindrop or maybe a tear from her cheek. "You're soaked," he said, voice low, almost tender. "Let's get you home, Mrs. Hughes." The city kept raining. But for the first time in a year, Catherine wasn't cold anymore. She was claimed. She was terrified. And somewhere beneath the fear, something dangerously close to power was waking up. Drop in the comment section where in the world you're watching from. Don't forget to click the subscribe button, because Catherine's story is just getting started. The Maybach cut through the night like a black blade. Catherine sat pressed against the door. Timothy's coat still around her shoulders, the weight of his arm no longer on her waist, but somehow still burning through every layer of wet clothing. Neither of them spoke. The only sound was the rhythmic slap of the wipers and the low, steady hum of the engine. "Mrs. Hughes." He'd said it like it was already fact, like the city itself had agreed months ago and simply forgotten to tell her. She stared at the ring on her left hand, a thin band of brushed platinum, no diamonds, no flash. It looked like something you'd wear into battle instead of a ballroom. She turned it with her thumb, once, twice, waiting for the panic to rise. It didn't. What rose instead was exhaustion, so complete it felt like drowning. Timothy watched her in the reflection of the partition glass. He hadn't looked away once. When the car finally slowed, it wasn't in front of her crumbling walk-up in Chinatown. It was a private garage beneath a pre-war building on the edge of Soho, all poured concrete and armed men who straightened the second the Maybach appeared. One of them opened her door before she could reach for the handle. "Welcome home, Mrs. Hughes," he said, utterly neutral. She stepped out on legs that didn't feel like hers. Timothy rounded the car and offered his hand. Not a request. A quiet command wrapped in courtesy. She took it. His palm was warm, rough along the edges, the hand of a man who had broken bones and signed contracts in the same night. He didn't let go as they rode the private elevator to the top floor. The doors slid open directly into the apartment, no hallway, no neighbors, just dark wood, high ceilings, and windows that stretched from floor to ceiling. Rain streaked the glass like tears. The city couldn't stop crying. Everything smelled faintly of cedar and gun oil and something expensive she couldn't name. Timothy released her hand only to shrug out of his wet coat. Underneath he wore a black shirt, sleeves rolled once, exposing forearms corded with muscle and ink. A saint on one arm, a skull on the other. Both looked equally prayed to. "You're shivering," he said. "I'm fine." "You're not." He disappeared through a doorway and came back with a thick towel and one of his shirts. "Bathroom's first door on the left. Water's hot, take as long as you need." She wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers. Instead, she clutched the towel like a shield and fled. The shower could have scalded skin off bone, and she would have stood under it anyway. She stayed until her fingers pruned and the mirror fogged so thick she couldn't see the woman Michael used to call broken. When she came out, the shirt hung to mid-thigh, sleeves past her fingertips. Timothy's scent clung to the cotton. It made her feel stolen and safe in the same breath. He was in the kitchen bare feet, sleeves now pushed higher, pouring 2 fingers of something amber into a heavy crystal glass. He didn't drink, just held it out to her. "Sit," he said. She sat. He took the stool across the island, elbows on the marble, eyes steady. The silence stretched until it had teeth. "You have questions," he finally said. "That's one word for it." A flicker of something that might have been amusement crossed his face. "Ask." "How long?" Her voice cracked on the second word. She hated it. "How long have you been watching me?" Timothy didn't flinch. "Since the night you stitched up Matteo Rossi in the clinic and refused payment because his mother was crying in the hallway. 3 months ago." Catherine's stomach dropped. She remembered that night, a 17-year-old with a knife wound across his ribs, blood soaking the paper sheet, his terrified mother clutching rosary beads outside the curtain. Catherine had worked 40 minutes past end of shift, no overtime, no forms, just quiet hands and steady voice telling the kid he was going to be okay. She'd gone home afterward and eaten cold ramen over the sink. She had never seen Timothy that night. She would have remembered. I owed Mateo a life debt, Timothy continued, voice low. You collected it for him. Debts like that don't go unpaid. I didn't do it for you. I know. The smallest tilt of his head. That's why it mattered. He slid off the stool and moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back, city lights bleeding across the sharp lines of his profile. 2 weeks later, the Cloves put a price on the head of anyone who helped Rossi family that night, including off-the-books nurses. He turned. You were on the list, Catherine. Ice slid down her spine. I put men on you. Quietly. You never saw them. You were never supposed to. His jaw flexed. Then the list escalated. They decided an example needed to be made. A public one. She swallowed. So you married the example. A muscle jumped in his cheek. In this state, a spouse can't be compelled to testify. Medical records sealed under spousal privilege. Safe houses, accounts, protection orders, all of it becomes ironclad the moment the license is signed. He met her eyes. Marriage was the only shield I could raise fast enough that they couldn't touch you first. The room felt suddenly too small. You could have warned me, she whispered. You could have asked. I did ask. His voice dropped. You said yes. Memory slammed into her, a dimly lit office that smelled of leather and candle wax, rain hammering the skylight, Timothy across a desk with a marriage license already filled out in careful, slanted handwriting. I can keep you alive, Catherine, but I need your signature tonight. After that, no one can take you from me. Not the Cloves. Not anyone. She had been shaking so hard the pen skipped across the page. She remembered the weight of his hand steadying hers. Remembered thinking she was trading one cage for another. She hadn't known it would feel like breathing for the first time. I thought it was temporary, she said now. Timothy's silence was answer enough. The wedding had been at 3:12 a.m. in a side chapel of an empty church in Little Italy. No flowers, no music, just two witnesses who never turned around and a priest who signed the book without looking up. Timothy had slid the ring on her finger with the same reverence another man might use to load a gun. Then he'd kissed her forehead chaste, solemn, and whispered, "It's done." That was 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks of living in this penthouse like a ghost. 6 weeks of guards calling her Mrs. Hughes while she still reached for her old name like a bruise. 6 weeks of Timothy sleeping in the room down the hall, never once crossing the threshold of the master suite he'd given her. 6 weeks of catching him, watching her across breakfast tables and rooftops and rainy windows with an intensity that made her skin feel too tight. He hadn't touched her. Not once. Not until tonight, when Michael's voice cracked open the past, and Timothy's arm became the only solid thing in a spinning world. Catherine set the untouched glass on the counter. What happens now? Now, he said, you stop looking over your shoulder. You stop flinching at shadows. You start living like the city already knows you belong to me. He paused. And I start convincing you that you were never a sacrifice. Her throat closed. He moved closer, slow enough that she could have stepped back. She didn't. You think I married you out of duty, he said quietly. You think I keep my distance because this is a transaction. His knuckles brushed the sleeve of the shirt she wore, his shirt light as smoke. I keep my distance because the first time I saw you hold a terrified kid together with nothing but your voice and your hands, I stopped being able to think straight, and men like me don't survive not thinking straight. Catherine's pulse hammered so hard, she felt it in her teeth. I'm patient, he continued. I've waited 34 years to want something I couldn't take. I can wait longer. His gaze dropped to her mouth and lingered. But I'm not noble, Catherine. Don't mistake restraint for indifference. The air between them pulled taut, electric, dangerous. Somewhere in the building, a clock chimed 4. The rain kept falling. Timothy stepped back first, breaking the spell. Guest room is yours as long as you want it. Nothing changes tonight. He turned toward the hallway, pausing at the threshold. But tomorrow, the city wakes up and learns what happened on that street. Michael won't stay quiet. The Cloves won't stay patient, and I'll be damned if I let either of them near you again. He looked back, eyes glittering in the half-dark. Sleep, Catherine. Tomorrow we stop pretending this marriage is on paper. Then he was gone, footsteps silent, door closing with a whisper that somehow sounded louder than any slam. Catherine stood alone in the cavernous kitchen, fingers clenched around the ring that suddenly felt heavier than any chain Michael had ever forged. Outside, thunder rolled over Manhattan like an approaching army. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she wasn't afraid of the storm. She was part of it. The rain didn't stop for 9 more days. It fell in sheets, in needles, in slow, deliberate curtains that turned every gutter into a river and every neon sign into a bleeding wound. Manhattan drowned quietly while the city pretended it was business as usual. Catherine felt it in her bones long before the news reached her. Michael Schramm did not go home that night. He stood under the awning of a closed bodega on Canal until the storm soaked him to the marrow, staring at the spot where Timothy Hughes had pulled her against his chest like she belonged there. Like she had always belonged there. The ring had been the first shock. The way Timothy said her name, Catherine, not Cat, not Kathy, not baby, was the second. The way Timothy looked at him, like Michael was already a corpse taking up space, was the third. Michael had laughed at first. A cracked, ugly sound that ricocheted off the wet brick. Then he'd walked. Walked until his shoes split and his knuckles bled from punching a wall he couldn't name. Walked until he found himself outside Catherine's old walk-up in Chinatown, staring up at a dark window that wasn't hers anymore. She was gone. Taken. Married. He told himself it was a joke. Some rich asshole's charity case, a publicity stunt, a sick game. He told himself that until he typed Timothy's name into a burner phone and the screen filled with things that made his stomach fold in on itself. Hughes Syndicate. 5 boroughs. 3 states. Ports, unions, half the judges in the Southern District. A body count that didn't bother keeping track anymore. Michael sat on the curb in the rain and felt the last piece of the life he thought he'd ruined come back to bite him in the throat. He started digging. Old friends. Burner accounts. A cousin who owed him money and worked nights at one police plaza. He learned the marriage license was real. Filed the morning after some 17-year-old Rossi kid got knifed. He learned the penthouse on Crosby Street had been transferred into Catherine's name the same week. He learned Timothy Hughes had never been photographed with a woman longer than one night. Until her. Michael printed everything. Photos. Articles. Grainy stills from security cameras that showed Timothy watching Catherine leave the clinic weeks before the wedding like a wolf deciding when to strike. He pinned it all to the wall of the motel room he paid for in cash off the Bowery. Red string. Obsession. Madness. He left voicemails on her old number until it stopped accepting them. He stood outside the clinic on her old shift days until security started recognizing his face. He told himself he just wanted to talk. He told himself he was worried about her. He told himself anything but the truth. That seeing her protected, seeing her wanted, seeing her married to someone who looked at her like she was oxygen, had cracked something irreparable inside his chest. He wanted it back. All of it. The control. the certainty that she would always be the one left bleeding. He just didn't know how to take it yet. Catherine, meanwhile, was learning what it felt like to live inside a fortress that watched her sleep. Timothy never raised his voice, never crowded her, never demanded. But the penthouse had eyes in every corner, and every pair reported to him. She caught the shifts immediately. The way the guards outside the elevator straightened when she stepped out in the morning. The way the doorman suddenly knew her coffee order oat milk, 2 sugars, no sleeve. The way Timothy's driver appeared downstairs exactly 3 minutes before she ever left for the clinic, no matter how quietly she tried to slip out. She told herself she hated it. She told herself she was still a prisoner. She told herself anything but the truth, that for the first time in years, she slept without locking her bedroom door. And then the nightmares came back. They always started the same. Michael's apartment in Bushwick, 2 years ago. The positive test in her shaking hand. His face, when she told him first disbelief, then something colder. You think I want a kid with you? You think I want to be tied to you forever? The screaming. The way he'd grabbed her arm hard enough to leave fingerprints for weeks. The shove. The stares. She woke up choking on her own scream, the phantom ache low in her belly so real she curled around it like it could still bleed. The first time it happened, Timothy was in her room before her eyes adjusted to the dark. He didn't touch her, just knelt beside the bed, voice low and steady. Breathe, Catherine, you're here, you're safe. She couldn't stop shaking. He stayed on the floor all night, back against the wall, gun on his thigh, watching the door like the past might try to walk through it. By the 4th nightmare, she stopped pretending she didn't want him there. He never asked what they were about. He simply became the thing that stood between her and the dark. One morning, she found him in the gym at 5 a.m. Shirtless, knuckles bleeding, heavy bag swinging like it had personally offended him. She watched from the doorway, throat dry. He sensed her the way he always did. Stopped mid-punch. Turned. His chest rose and fell hard, ink shifting with every breath. A new bruise bloomed along his ribs, purple, vicious. What happened? She asked. Nothing. You're bleeding. He glanced down like he hadn't noticed. It's fine. It's not. Something cracked in his face, something raw and furious and helpless. I found out where he's staying, he said quietly. Motel off the Bowery. Walls covered in pictures of you. Catherine's knees buckled. She caught the doorframe. Timothy crossed the room in 3 strides and caught her before she hit the floor. I handled it, he said against her hair. He won't bother you again. She pulled back, searching his face. Handled it how? He didn't answer. That was answer enough. She should have been horrified. She should have demanded details. Instead, she pressed her forehead to his collarbone and whispered, "Thank you." His arms tightened around her like he was afraid she'd vanish. Later that week, the invitation arrived. Heavy cream cardstock. Gold foil crest. The Clove family seal. A gala at the Pierre. Black tie. Neutral ground. Timothy read it once, expression unreadable, then set it on fire in the sink. We're not going, he said. But the city had other plans. 2 nights later, Catherine came home from the clinic to find him in the walk-in closet, knotting a midnight blue tie with lethal precision. She stopped in the doorway. I thought we weren't going. We weren't. He met her eyes in the mirror. Then Irina made it personal. He turned, took in her scrubs and messy bun and exhausted eyes, and something softened. You don't have to come, he said. I can keep you safe from a distance. She thought of Michael's motel walls. She thought of nightmares that left her screaming. She thought of the way Timothy's hand had felt on her waist in the rain, like the only real thing left in the world. "I'm coming," she said. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once. The dress appeared the next day. Midnight silk, off the shoulder, backless. It fit like it had been poured over her skin. When she walked into the living room, Timothy froze mid-sentence on a phone call. The person on the other end kept talking. He hung up without saying goodbye. Catherine self-consciously tugged at the hem. Too much? He crossed the room slowly, eyes never leaving her. "You're going to start a war in that dress," he said, voice rough. "Good," she answered. "Let them come." His smile was small, sharp, proud. The Pierce ballroom glittered like a knife fight in a chandelier. Old money, new money, blood money. Every syndicate head in the tri-state area circled like sharks in Brioni and Chanel. Catherine stayed on Timothy's arm, chin high, pulse hammering. They hadn't taken 6 steps inside before Irina Clove appeared. She was everything Catherine wasn't. Tall, ice, blonde, cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass. The red gown clung to her like a threat. "Timothy," Irina purred, ignoring Catherine completely. "You brought a guest." Timothy's grip tightened. "You brought an audience." Irina's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I brought a reminder. Alliances matter. Some more than others." Her gaze finally slid to Catherine, slow and dissecting. "So this is the little nurse." A soft laugh. "How quaint." Catherine felt Timothy tense, ready to destroy. She stepped forward first. "Catherine Hughes," she said, offering her hand like a blade. "And you are?" Irina stared at the outstretched hand like it was diseased. Timothy's chest vibrated with a sound that wasn't quite laughter. Irina recovered, smile sharpening. "Enjoy the champagne, Mrs. Hughes. It pairs beautifully with irrelevance." She glided away. Timothy leaned down, lips brushing Catherine's ear. "You just made an enemy." "Good," Catherine whispered back. "I'm tired of being afraid." Later, on the terrace, snow started to fall fat, lazy flakes that melted on contact with the city's heat. Timothy handed her a glass of something strong and watched her like she might disappear. "She'll come for you now," he said quietly. "Let her." He turned her to face him, hands framing her face. "I need you to understand something." His voice was raw. "This marriage stopped being about protection the first time you looked at me like I wasn't a monster." Catherine's breath caught. "I don't know how to do this," he continued. "I don't know how to be soft. I don't know how to be safe. But I know I will burn every bridge this city has before I let anyone hurt you again. Including me. Including me." Snow caught in his lashes. She reached up and brushed it away. "I'm not asking you to be safe," she said. "I'm asking you to be mine." Something shattered behind his eyes. He kissed her then slow, reverent, like she was the only prayer he'd ever learned. When they pulled apart, the city was watching. And for the first time, Catherine didn't care. Inside, Irina Clove smiled into her champagne. The war had just begun. The first whisper reached them at a charity auction in Brooklyn Heights. A woman in diamonds and inherited cruelty leaned toward another and said, loud enough for the table behind her to hear, "Poor Timothy. Marrying damaged goods just to keep the Cloves at bay. Did you hear? She lost a baby." The ex pushed her downstairs. Tragic, really. Hardly Queen material. Catherine heard it from across the room. The words floated through the crystal chandeliers and the string quartet and landed in her chest like buckshot. She excused herself before the dessert course, walked blindly to the ladies' room, and locked herself in the marble stall. The sobs came silent, the way they always did when the hurt was too big for sound. She had never told a soul. Not her mother. Not the ER doctor who'd stitched the gash on her forehead. Not even the therapist she'd seen twice before Michael convinced her therapy was for weak people. The miscarriage belonged to the darkest corner of her body, a grave she visited alone at 3 a.m. when the ache woke her. And now the entire underworld knew. By morning, it was everywhere. Group chats, back rooms of social clubs. Encrypted messages passed between capos like trading cards. The little nurse who couldn't keep a baby. The boss's wife who came pre-broken. Unfit. Barren. A liability. Timothy found out when Victor, his consigliere and oldest friend, slid a phone across the breakfast table with a frozen screenshot of the gossip thread. Timothy read it once. The muscle in his jaw ticked. Then he put the phone face down, stood, and walked out without a word. Catherine was in the clinic's break room when the first patient asked, eyes bright with pity, "Is it true about the baby, Mrs. Hughes?" She dropped an entire tray of gauze. By the end of shift, 3 more people had offered condolences for a loss she'd never publicly grieved. She came home early, changed into one of Timothy's shirts and nothing else, and curled into the corner of the sectional like a wounded animal. Timothy found her there at dusk. He didn't speak. He simply lifted her into his lap, wrapped a cashmere throw around them both, and held her while the city turned violet outside the windows. Eventually, her breathing evened out. "Who told you?" she whispered. "Everyone." His voice was lethal quiet. "Doesn't matter, they won't say it again." She laughed, a cracked sound. "You can't kill gossip, Timothy. I can kill the people carrying it." She looked up then, saw the murder in his eyes, and for the first time, it didn't frighten her. "I never wanted you to know," she said. "I thought, if you knew how broken I really was." "You think a lost baby makes you broken?" He cupped her face, thumbs wiping tears she hadn't realized were still falling. "Catherine, I have buried brothers. I have held dying soldiers in my arms and felt their blood cool on my hands. I have ordered men to graves they begged to avoid. There is nothing you could tell me that would make me see you as less." She tried to pull away. He wouldn't let her. "I wish I'd been there," he said, voice raw. "I wish I'd been the one to catch you on those stairs. I wish I'd been the one to put him in the ground for touching you. I hate every second you carried that alone." The tears came harder. He pressed his forehead to hers. "You are not unfit. You are not a liability. You are the only thing in this entire rotten empire that feels like redemption. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure no one ever makes you feel small again." She broke open, then really broke, and he held every piece. Later, when the crying had exhausted itself into hiccups and shuddering breaths, he carried her to bed, tucked her against his chest, and stayed awake all night, tracing the scar on her hairline, the one hidden under her bangs that had come from hitting the banister the night she lost everything. He kissed it until she fell asleep. The next morning, 3 prominent wives who had repeated the gossip received deliveries. Their husbands' favorite watches stopped at the exact minute they'd sent the messages. No note. Just the watches. The gossip stopped. But the damage was done. Michael, of course, heard everything. He sat in his rotting motel room and stared at the ultrasound photo he'd stolen from her trash 2 years ago, grainy, 8 weeks, a smudge that had once been a heartbeat and felt something vicious bloom. She'd never told him she kept it. She'd never told him she still cried over it. He convinced himself that meant she still loved him. He started leaving gifts outside the clinic. First, a single white rose on the windshield of the car service that picked her up. Then a sonogram frame empty tied with black ribbon. Then a note in his handwriting. "You owe me the truth, Kat." Security doubled. Timothy wanted to close the clinic entirely. Catherine refused. "He doesn't get to take this from me too." Timothy let her win that one. But he moved 6 men into the building across the street, and slept in the on-call room 3 nights a week. Irina Clove watched it all with the patience of a spider. She waited until Catherine was raw, until the nightmares came nightly, until every mirror felt like an accusation, until the word Baron echoed in her skull like a drum. Then she struck. It started with a lunch invitation. Hand-delivered. Heavy cardstock. Irina's personal crest. A private room at Le Cuckoo. Neutral ground, no men allowed. Catherine almost threw it away. Timothy read it, eyes black with fury, and said, "You don't have to." But something in her, the part that was tired of hiding, wanted to look her enemy in the eye. She went. Irina was already seated, sunlight catching the diamonds at her throat like frost. "Sit," she said, smiling like a cat. "I ordered for us both. Champagne?" Catherine remained standing. "Say what you came to say." Irina's smile widened. "Direct. I like that." She sipped. "I'm here to offer you a way out." Catherine laughed once, sharp. "There is no out." "There is always an out." Irina slid a folder across the table. "Annulment papers. Already drafted. All you have to do is sign, walk away, and Timothy marries me like he was always meant to. The Cloves forget you exist. You're little. Tragedy stays buried. You go back to stitching junkies and pretending you're normal." Catherine didn't touch the folder. "And if I don't?" Irina leaned forward. "Then I keep digging. And, darling, there are things even your husband doesn't know. Things about that night on the stairs. Things about why you really never pressed charges." Her voice dropped to silk and venom. "Sign, or I make sure the entire city knows exactly how pathetic you truly are." Catherine stared at her for a long moment. Then she picked up the champagne flute and poured it slowly over the annulment papers. "Tell Timothy yourself," she said. "See how that works out for you." She walked out. But the poison was already in her blood. That night, she stood in the shower until the water ran cold, watching pink trails swirl down the drain from scrubbing her skin raw. Timothy found her there, fully dressed, sitting on the bathroom floor. He turned off the water, wrapped her in a towel, carried her to bed. She couldn't stop shaking. "Irina said you had no choice," she whispered against his throat. "That you're stuck with me until the alliance forces your hand. That I'm just a placeholder." Timothy went very still. Then he pulled back, cupped her face, forced her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me." His voice was low, dangerous, tender. There was a moment right after we signed the license when the priest asked if anyone objected. "Do you remember?" She nodded, barely. "I waited," he said. "I stood there in that empty church, and I waited for you to stand up and run. I would have let you. I swear on my mother's grave, Catherine, I would have torn up the license and put you on a plane myself if you looked even slightly unsure." She hadn't. She'd stared straight ahead, knuckles white on the pew, and whispered, "I do," like it was the only truth she had left. "I didn't marry you because I had to," he said. "I married you because the alternative was a world where you weren't safe, and that was no longer a world I was willing to live in." He kissed her, then slow, deliberate, like he was trying to rewrite every lie she'd ever been told. But the lies had roots. 3 days later, Michael made his boldest move. He waited until Timothy was in Jersey overseeing a shipment. Then he walked into the clinic wearing scrubs he'd stolen from a laundry service, clipboard in hand, and asked for Catherine Thomas. The charge nurse buzzed her without looking up. Catherine stepped into the hallway and froze. Michael looked thinner. Eyes bloodshot. The charming smile he'd once used like a weapon now looked cracked. "Cat," he said softly. "We need to talk." She turned to run. He grabbed her wrist, same grip, same spot, same bruises blooming under her skin like memory. "You owe me," he hissed. "After everything I did for you." She yanked free, voice shaking with rage. You killed our baby. The hallway went silent. Michael's face crumpled. Real pain, or brilliant acting, she no longer knew. I was scared, he said. I was 27 and drowning and you were. Get out. Cat. Get out. Security descended. Michael was dragged away screaming her name. She locked herself in a supply closet and vomited until there was nothing left. Timothy was back within the hour, tie askew, knuckles bleeding. He'd driven 110 the whole way. He didn't ask questions, just held her while she shook apart. That night, Irina sent a gift. A single black and white ultrasound photo in a silver frame. On the back, written in perfect calligraphy, placeholder. Catherine stared at it until the image burned behind her eyes. She waited until Timothy was asleep, really asleep, gun under the pillow, breathing deep and even. Then she packed a small bag. Jeans, hoodie, the emergency cash she kept in the safe, the burner phone she'd bought weeks ago and never used. She stood over him for a long time, memorizing the scar through his eyebrow, the way his hand even in sleep reached toward the place she usually lay. She pressed a kiss to his forehead, tasting salt and gunpowder, and the only safety she'd ever known. I'm sorry, she whispered. Then she walked out into the rain. The city swallowed her whole. She didn't see Timothy wake alone, reach for her, find the bed cold. She didn't hear the roar that tore out of him when he realized she was gone. Primal, devastated, furious. She didn't see him tear the penthouse apart, looking for a note that wasn't there. She only knew that every step away from him felt like walking backward into the grave Michael had once pushed her toward. And somewhere, in a warehouse in Red Hook, Irina Clove poured herself a drink and smiled. The trap was sprung. The moment Timothy realized she was gone, the temperature in the penthouse dropped 10 degrees. He reached across the sheets first, instinct, habit, then sat up so fast the headboard cracked against the wall. The room was dark, the city beyond the windows, a dull sodium smear. No note. No phone. The safe yawning open like a scream. Her wedding ring sat on the nightstand, small and accusing and cold. He stared at it for 3 full seconds. Then the roar came. Not a shout. A sound that belonged to something caged and wounded and ancient. It tore out of his chest and rattled the glass in the frames. The guards in the hall flinched. One dropped his coffee. Timothy was already moving. He tore through the apartment like a hurricane in human form. Drawers ripped out, closets emptied, every camera feed pulled up and rewound 100 times. Nothing. She had vanished into the rain, wearing his hoodie and carrying the weight of every lie Irina had fed her. Victor found him on the terrace at dawn, barefoot in the downpour, knuckles bleeding from punching the brick wall until the mortar crumbled. She's gone, Timothy said, voice shredded. She left me. Victor had known him 24 years and had never once seen him cry. He saw it now. Timothy didn't sleep. Didn't eat, didn't stop. He started with the clinic, tore the schedule apart, threatened every nurse, every janitor, every patient who had ever looked at her sideways. Nothing. He hit the streets next. Every informant, every corner boy, every junkie who owed him a favor felt his hands around their throat until they gave him something, anything. He shut down 3 clove warehouses in one night, put 2 captains in the hospital, burned a fleet of their vans to twisted skeletons in Red Hook. The city whispered that Timothy Hughes had finally snapped. He welcomed the rumor. Let them be afraid. Fear made people careless. Between the violence, the memories came. The first time he ever saw her. October. Pouring rain. He'd been in the back of a tinted SUV outside the clinic, waiting for Matteo Rossi to come out after the stabbing. Instead, he watched a nurse in purple scrubs kneel in the alley, shielding a homeless man from the storm with her own body while she wrapped his frostbitten feet. She used her lunch break. Didn't look up once to see if anyone noticed. He noticed. Another night, weeks later, she'd bought a street kid a burger with her last 20 and then walked home in the cold because she'd given the boy her Metro card. He followed at a distance, furious with himself for caring, furious with the city for letting her be that good in a place that ate goodness alive. He never approached. He simply moved pieces on a chessboard she didn't know existed until the night the Cloves put her name on a kill list. Now the board was on fire, and the queen was missing. On the fourth day, a burner phone buzzed in his pocket, unknown number. A single text. Warehouse 39. Pier 41. Midnight. Come alone or she disappears forever. He went alone. He walked into the trap with both eyes open and every gun in the 5 boroughs ready to follow the second he gave the signal. But Catherine wasn't there. Only Irina, flanked by 6 of her best, smiling like Christmas had come early. She's not yours anymore, Timothy. Irina said softly. She never was. You forced her. I simply reminded her what freedom feels like. He didn't speak. Just stared at her with the kind of emptiness that made stronger men soil themselves. Irina's smile faltered. You'll tell me where she is, he said, voice flat. Or I start taking pieces of you until the screaming maps the way. He left with 3 of her fingers in a plastic bag and the location burning a hole in his mind. An abandoned Cloves safe house in College Point, Queens. Concrete and rust and the smell of the East River. He drove himself. No convoy. No backup. Just the 45 under his coat and the photograph of Catherine he kept in his wallet, taken without her knowing, the night she fell asleep on the couch with a medical journal open on her chest. He was done playing by anyone else's rules. Meanwhile, in the safe house, Catherine learned what real captivity felt like. The room was bare except for a cot, a bucket, and a single flickering bulb. Her wrists were zip-tied. Her ankle chained to the wall. Irina visited twice a day to drip poison. He's coming to annul the marriage tonight, she lied on the second day. He's tired of the scandal. Tired of pretending you matter. Catherine stopped eating. On the 5th day, the door opened and Michael walked in. He looked clean. Composed. Almost like the man she'd once loved. Cat, he said, kneeling, cupping her face with gentle hands that still made her flinch. I'm getting you out. She stared at him, hollow-eyed. You're working with her. It was the only way to save you. He brushed her hair back. Timothy was going to throw you away. I couldn't let that happen. She laughed until she cried. He unchained her ankle, helped her stand on legs that hadn't held weight in days. She let him lead her outside into the storm that had finally broken over the city, like judgment. Rain lashed the cracked asphalt of the old pier. Lightning forked across the sky. Michael kept one arm around her waist, steering her toward a waiting car. We'll disappear, he whispered. Start over. Just us. She stopped walking. He turned, confused. And that was when the headlights cut through the dark. Timothy's Maybach screamed to a halt 30 feet away. The door flew open. He stepped out into the storm like vengeance made flesh, coat whipping, gun drawn, eyes wild. Michael shoved Catherine behind him and pulled his own weapon. Timothy didn't even glance at the gun. He walked forward, slow, deliberate, water streaming off him like he was being reborn in the rain. Michael's hand shook. Step away from my wife, Timothy said. The words cracked across the space between them like thunder. Michael laughed, high and panicked. She was never yours. She's coming with me. Catherine stepped out from behind Michael. Timothy's eyes locked on her, starving, terrified, furious, relieved. She was soaked, shaking, barefoot in his hoodie, but alive. Michael grabbed her arm, yanking her back. The sound that came out of Timothy then wasn't human. He moved. 2 strides, gun raised, and then Catherine was between them, palms against his chest. "No," she said. Voice raw but steady. "Not like this." Michael tried to pull her away again. Timothy's tattooed hand shot out, closing around Michael's throat, lifting him clear off the ground. Michael choked, feet kicking. Catherine grabbed Timothy's wrist. "Look at me." His eyes, black with murder, snapped to hers. "I left because I was afraid I wasn't enough," she said, rain mixing with tears. "Don't prove I was right." Timothy's grip loosened. Michael dropped, gasping. Catherine turned to her ex. "You don't get to decide my worth," she said. "You never did." Michael stared at her like he was seeing a stranger. Timothy stepped forward, shrugging out of his coat. He wrapped it around Catherine's trembling shoulders, pulled her against his chest exactly like the night everything began, tattooed, hand possessive over her collarbone, body shielding her from the storm and from the past. Michael watched, frozen, as the truth finally sank in. She wasn't the girl he'd broken anymore. She was the wife of the most dangerous man in New York. And she had chosen him. Timothy's voice was death quiet against her ear. "We're going home." Catherine nodded, burying her face in his shirt. Michael took one stumbling step forward. "Cat." Timothy turned, eyes promising every circle of hell. "Touch her again," he said, "and they will never find enough of you to bury." Michael believed him. He ran. The rain swallowed him whole. Timothy lifted Catherine into his arms. She weighed nothing, felt like everything, and carried her to the car. He didn't let go the entire drive back to Manhattan. Didn't speak until they were inside the penthouse, until he'd peeled off her wet clothes and wrapped her in blankets and warmth and himself. Then he knelt in front of her, took her hands, pressed his forehead to her knuckles. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm sorry I ever let you believe you were anything less than my entire world." Catherine cupped his face, thumbs tracing the tears he would never admit were there. "I'm here," she said. "I'm yours, and I'm never leaving again." Outside, the storm finally broke. Inside, for the first time in either of their lives, the silence felt like peace. The city woke up the next morning to find the Clove Empire bleeding from every artery. Timothy didn't declare war. He simply ended it. By noon, federal seizure notices were taped to the doors of 3 Clove-owned towers on Billionaires Row. By 3, the Port Authority had frozen every container with a Clove seal. By 6, the old man who sat at the head of their family, Irina's uncle, was on a plane to Sicily with nothing but the clothes on his back and a promise that if he ever returned, the plane would land in pieces. Irina herself was taken from her penthouse on Central Park South at dusk. No cameras. No drama. Just 2 of Timothy's men in plain clothes, polite smiles, and a black Suburban with diplomatic plates that no cop in the city would dare pull over. She fought. Screamed. Threatened. They zip-tied her wrists with the same plastic restraints she'd once used on Catherine and carried her out like luggage. Timothy didn't watch the video. He deleted it the moment Victor sent it. He had better things to do. Catherine spent the first 3 days after the pier in a half-sleep, curled against Timothy's chest in their bed, waking only when the nightmares came. Each time she startled awake gasping, he was already there, arms tightening, voice low and steady against her temple. "I've got you. You're home, you're safe." On the 4th morning she woke up alone. Panic spiked, old, familiar, vicious, until she smelled coffee and heard the low murmur of male voices in the kitchen. She padded barefoot down the hallway in one of Timothy's t-shirts and found him at the island, sleeves rolled high, hair still damp from the shower, reading something on a tablet while Victor stood opposite him, pouring coffee like the world wasn't currently on fire. Timothy looked up the second she appeared. Everything in his face softened. "Morning, wife," he said quietly. Victor cleared his throat, suddenly fascinated by the ceiling. Catherine walked straight into Timothy's arms. He pulled her onto his lap without hesitation, one hand settling possessively on her thigh, the other cradling the back of her head. "How much of the city did you burn down while I was asleep?" she asked against his neck. "Only the parts that deserved it." She laughed, actually laughed, and the sound cracked something open in the room. Victor excused himself with a muttered excuse about paperwork. The door had barely closed before Timothy was kissing her, slow, reverent, like he was still proving she was real. "I have something for you," he said when they broke apart. He reached into the drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. Catherine's heart stuttered. It wasn't the old ring. This one was rose gold, vintage, a single oval diamond set east-west, flanked by two tiny sapphires the exact color of a stormy sky. "I want to do this properly," he said. "No contracts. No threats hanging over our heads, just you and me and a question I should have asked the right way the first time." He slid from the stool and went down on one knee, still holding her hand. "Catherine P. Thomas, Hughes," he began, voice rough. "You have seen me at my worst, and you stayed. You have carried more pain than any one person should ever have to, and you still chose kindness. You are the only thing in my entire life I have never known how to live without." He swallowed hard. "Marry me again. For real this time. Not because the city demands it, not because someone put a gun to your head or mine. Marry me because you want to wake up next to me every morning for the rest of our lives. Marry me because I am hopelessly, stupidly, violently in love with you." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring on beside the simple band she'd left on the nightstand the night she ran. 2 rings now. Past and future. Paper and promise. He kissed her like a man who had finally been handed the only thing he ever prayed for. The second wedding was nothing like the first. No 3 a.m. chapel. No silent witnesses. No priest who refused to look up. It was sunset on the roof of the penthouse, the city spread out beneath them like a map of every war they'd survived. Just them, Victor, the officiant, a judge who owed Timothy his life twice over, and a string quartet playing something soft and old. Catherine wore ivory silk that caught the dying light like fire. Timothy wore black, always black. But the tie was the same storm blue as the sapphires in her ring. They wrote their own vows. Catherine spoke first. "I spent years believing I was only worth what someone was willing to break in me. You looked at the pieces and decided they were worth protecting. You gave me back my name, my safety, my future. I will love you on the days the rain is gentle and on the days it tries to drown us. I will love you in the light and in the dark and everywhere in between. You are my home, Timothy Hughes. Today and every day after." Timothy's voice cracked on the first word. "I have spent my life learning how to take. You taught me how to give. You taught me that power isn't in how many people fear you. It's in the one person who never has to. I will spend the rest of my life earning the honor of being the man you look at, the way you're looking at me right now. You are my conscience, my salvation, my entire world. I love you more than breath. I love you more than blood. I love you, Catherine. Always." They kissed before the judge finished pronouncing them husband and wife. Later, when the guests were gone and the city glittered 38 floors below, Timothy carried her over the threshold of the master bedroom, properly this time, and laid her on the bed like she was something sacred. They made love slow and deliberate, learning every inch of each other without fear or urgency for the first time. After, when the room was quiet except for their breathing and the distant hum of Manhattan, Catherine traced the scar through his eyebrow. "I need to tell you something," she said softly. He stilled, waiting. She took a breath that shook. "2 years ago I was pregnant. 8 weeks, Michael, he didn't want it. We fought. He pushed me. I fell down 13 stairs. I lost the baby in the ambulance." Her voice broke, but she kept going. "I never grieved properly because I was ashamed. Because I thought it was my fault for staying. Because I thought if I said it out loud, it would make it more real." Timothy's arms tightened until she could feel his heartbeat against her spine. "I named her," Catherine whispered. "In my head, Lily. After my grandmother, I never told anyone." Timothy pressed his lips to her shoulder, holding her like he could absorb the pain if he just held tight enough. "I'm so fucking sorry," he said, voice raw. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry you carried it alone." She turned in his arms, cupped his face. "I'm telling you now because I'm ready to stop carrying it alone. I want to remember her. I want to light a candle on her birthday and say her name out loud and know that she mattered. And I want to do it with you." He kissed her forehead, her eyelids, the tip of her nose. "Every year," he promised, "we'll light 2 candles. One for Lily, one for the woman who survived hell to become the strongest person I've ever known." They cried together then, quiet, cleansing tears that washed 2 years of poison out of her body and 20 years of violence out of his. When it was over, she felt lighter than she had since she was a child. Spring came early that year. The first warm day, Timothy took her to a small cemetery in Queens, where the city felt far away and the trees were just starting to bud. They stood in front of a tiny headstone he'd had made, simple granite, just a name and 2 dates 8 weeks apart. Lily Thomas Hughes. The loved daughter. You were loved for every second you existed. Catherine laid white lilies at the base. Timothy stood behind her, arms wrapped around her waist, chin on her shoulder. They stayed until the sun set and the air smelled like earth and possibility. That night, months after the last storm, the rain came back, soft, warm, almost gentle. They stood on the terrace wrapped in the same blanket, city lights shimmering through the mist. Timothy's hand rested low on her waist, thumb tracing idle circles over the silk of her robe. Catherine tilted her head back against his shoulder. "The rain doesn't scare me anymore," she said quietly. He pressed a kiss just below her ear. "Good," he murmured. "Because I plan on keeping you in it for the rest of our lives." She turned in his arms, rose on her toes, and kissed him slow and deep and certain. Somewhere below, a siren wailed and faded. Above them, the sky opened up and washed the city clean. And for the first time in either of their lives, the storm felt like a promise instead of a threat. They were not alone. They never would be again.